This video is about the German verb schlafen. It's a very common verb and it simply means to sleep. This is, of course, schlafen in its infinitive form with an en at the end, a classic infinitive ending in German. And let's just start off with look at the present tense conjugation of the verb. You might like to have a go yourself before we go through the answers. Let's just put our regular present tense endings on and see how that goes. So it all looks pretty good, except we do have one issue here, and that is that the verb schlafen is a strong verb, which means that these two forms are going to actually include a vowel change, or at least this is an indication that a verb is a strong verb. So in the present tense, it has this vowel change that we'll see with an umlaut on those two A's. And in the perfect past tense, we'll see that that indicates that the en is going to be maintained from the infinitive. That's why it's called strong, because the en is maintained. So here we have it. These are all correct now, these forms. Ich schlafe, I sleep. Du schläfst, you sleep. Er, sie, schläft, he, she, it sleeps. Wir schlafen, we sleep. Ihr schlaft, you plural sleep. And sie schlafen, they sleep, or you formal sleep. Watch out for the difference in pronunciation that these two forms bring with them. The is different from the and that's really important for understanding, not least because the ihr form looks exactly like the sie form, except for that vowel change. Let's now look at the simple past tense. The form is schlief, which is a bit weird. We're very used to those vowel changes, though, in the simple past, and that form will give you all the other forms that you need to use. The perfect past tense is this: hat geschlafen. And we've seen this perfect tense form, this past participle, before when I was explaining that it's a strong verb, so it keeps that en. Notice that the helping verb is haben. That's because you're not transitioning to a different state. You're maintaining the same state when you're sleeping. The future tense simply uses the verb werden in its correct form. So in the form, it's wird schlafen, he will sleep. And let's have a look at some idioms. There are some phrases that you need to know. For example, schlaf gut, sleep well, or gut geschlafen as a statement or a question. Slept well? Gut geschlafen? Did you sleep well? There's also schlafen in a metaphorical sense, and that's when you're just not paying attention. So you're not literally asleep, but you're not paying attention, you're not concentrating. And finally, how do you express sleeping really deeply? We might say in English something like sleep like a log. Well, there are two ways of saying that. One is tief und fest schlafen. So you're using these two words here as adverbs, tief und fest schlafen. So to sleep deeply and steadfastly. But there's also a nice image, which is this one, wie ein Murmeltier schlafen. A Murmeltier is a groundhog, and I have absolutely no idea whether they do sleep well or not, but there you go. That's the German animal metaphor that's used for sleeping well. Now let's do some conjugation practice with the verb schlafen, bearing in mind that this is its infinitive form, so we use this as the base and we go from there. Any of these could be past, present, or future tense, so you've got to figure out what they are, and I might give you a moment to pause the video and have a go yourself at filling in the blanks and translating them before we go through them. Number 1, ich schlafe im Durchschnitt 8 Stunden pro Tag. I sleep on average 8 hours a day, or 8 hours per day. Now our pronoun in the nominative case, our person in charge of the verb is ich. So for that reason, we have an E ending on the verb. It's going to be present tense because you're talking about how much you generally sleep. This is not something that was in the past or in the future. It's generally in the present tense. Number 2, hast du gut geschlafen? Did you sleep well? In this sentence, what's in charge of the verb? It's du. Even though it's a question and du doesn't come first, it's du, because du is a nominative pronoun, and so it's going to be giving the verb an ending. What's that ending? Well, it's st. It's the st in the helping verb, because that's the first verb in any perfect past tense sentence. The second verb is geschlafen. That's the past participle there, the second part of the verb, and that goes to the end of the sentence. Because it is a question, the first word will be either a question word or the verb, and because there's no question word, it's going to be the verb. Number 3, es ist wichtig, mindestens 7 Stunden pro Tag zu schlafen. It's important at least 7 hours per day to sleep, or to sleep at least 7 hours per day. Now, we might say per night in English, but if you're taking the day as the 24-hour time period, then this makes sense. What's in charge of the verb here? Well, there's nothing in charge of the verb. The first clause, es ist wichtig, is really impersonal. It is important. And in the second clause, we have a zu clause. That means nobody's in charge of it. It's going to go with the preposition zu in an impersonal structure, and zu plus the infinitive, they always pair together at the end of a clause. No matter what other information is included within these brackets, the zu and the schlafen are always going to go to the end. Number 4, ist überhaupt nicht müde, obwohl die ganze Nacht nicht geschlafen hat. So once again here, I'm giving you the helping verb, which means it's really easy to determine what tense the verb should be in, and it's the perfect past tense with the past participle there. What's interesting about this sentence? Well, is in charge of the verb in the first clause, ist. He's not tired at all. And then in the second clause, although he didn't sleep the whole night, we've got again in charge of the verb. Now, this is what's called a subordinate clause, and that's because it's subordinate to the main clause, the first half of the sentence. It can't exist without the main clause. And so this word obwohl, it's a subordinating conjunction. It's going to send the verb all the way to the end. So the helping verb's at the end. He has, and then we put the slept, the second part of the verb, tucked in behind the last verb there, and all the other information go in between the and the geschlafen. Number 5, geht frühzeitig schlafen. He goes to sleep early. What's happening here? Well, we've got in charge of the verb again, and this time has not a helping verb, but a different verb connected to it, and it's geht. We've got a T ending because of the It's present tense. And what's schlafen doing there? Is it in a tense, or why is there no zu if it's not in a tense? Well, it's because it's the second verb in this sentence, and gehen plus another verb is a really common construction in the present tense to say that you're going to do something. He goes to or is going to sleep. And the second verb is always going to have that en ending because it's in the infinitive, and there's no zu because you can almost treat this verb as the object of gehen, if you like. Number 6, die ganze Nacht durch konnte sie nicht schlafen. The whole night, through the whole night, she couldn't sleep. Now, look at where the person in charge of the verb is. Here it is, sie, all the way in the 6th position, the 6th word in the sentence. Why is it there? Have a think about it. We've got our verb, and that's konnte. Is it in second position? Absolutely. It still is in second position, even though it's the fifth word in the sentence. And that's because this first section, this first phrase is one idea, die ganze Nacht durch, through the whole night, throughout the whole night. That's one time phrase, that's one idea. So the verb is in second, and straight after the verb, we're going to have the person in charge of the verb, which is sie. And because it's a modal verb, because this comes from the modal verb können, konnte, then the second verb is going to be in its infinitive form, schlafen, with an en, and there's not going to be a zu. So I'm just going to write a zu and then cross it out. There is no zu after modal verbs. Number 7, gute Nacht, schlaf jetzt und träum was Süßes. This means something like, good night, sleep now, and sweet dreams. That's what we might say in English. Now, what's happening here with the verb? Let's have a look at the verb, schlaf. And there's also another one, träum. What's happening with those verbs there? Well, it's a bit of a trick, this one. These two verbs belong to what's called the imperative mood. That means they're a command. You're telling someone to do something. And if that's the case, and there's only one person, and it's not a formal situation, then you're just going to chop the en off the infinitive. Sometimes you might have an e as well, but you don't have to. So schlaf and träum just means sleep and dream as commands. Number 8. Sie genießt es, am Sonntag lange zu schlafen. She enjoys sleeping for a long time on Sunday, or sleeping in on Sunday. Now again here, we don't have anybody in charge of this zu clause. That's just offset by itself. We don't know who's in charge of that by itself. It doesn't matter. We just put a zu followed by the infinitive schlafen after it. But we do know who's in charge of the whole sentence, and that is sie. And because it's got a T, we know it's she, not they or you formal. So she enjoys it, comma. And that's how you have to say enjoy plus a verb in German. If you want to say enjoy plus a verb, you need to have es as an object, comma, and then a zu clause. Number 9. Mein Bruder lässt die Katze gerne in seinem Bett schlafen. Now this is an interesting one as well. So we have schlafen, and it's in its infinitive form at the end of the sentence. Why is that? Well, similarly to gern, which we looked at up here in the top right-hand corner, you can do the same thing with lassen. So lassen works in that scenario as well. And if you add lassen before another verb, an infinitive, then you're letting somebody else do something. So we've got my brother in this sentence. My brother lets the cat, and then the cat is the one who's in charge of this second verb. Lets the cat sleep in his bed, and then we've got the word gladly. So he likes to let the cat sleep in his bed. Lassen plus another verb in infinitive, in this case schlafen. Number 10. Ich bin erst weit nach Mitternacht eingeschlafen. Again here, I'm sort of trying to trick you. We've got in charge of the verb ich, and because there's an ich, that means the verb will be connected to it, or the verb will have an ich ending, and it does. That's bin. It's irregular, so it doesn't have the e ending. It's got its irregular ending according to sein, the verb sein in its conjugation. And why is that verb there? Well, it's there because of the overall verb here. What is the overall verb? It's einschlafen, to fall asleep. So I sort of tricked you there by putting in the ein already, which is the separable prefix. And so if you have not just schlafen, but einschlafen, it means to fall asleep. And so this is fell asleep. This is the past participle at the end of the sentence here. So I fell asleep only way after midnight. Or I did not fall asleep until well after midnight. One extra thing to notice here is that we've got the helping verb bin, and that's because einschlafen involves a change of state, a transition of state. You're going from being awake to being asleep, so the helping verb will need to be sein.